This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We are now entering that time of the year, gobble, gobble, the gift that keeps on giving before we actually get to Christmas, and that is the NBA. And let it not be said that we were probably, a week or so away from, quote-unquote, the biggest scandal in NBA history. That is an afterthought because people need to be paying attention to all the good basketball and the good basketball drama that is taking your way. I can't say, more than what it actually speaks to for itself, Shaw, because, when it comes down to the NBA, man, I know people got Landman. I know they got Tulsa King, but nothing beats a good NBA story at the early outset of the season.
I like where you're going with that. I'm a big Landman guy. I think Landman comes back tonight. Actually, I'm gonna definitely dig into that this evening. Not too big on the Tulsa King, though. Salone and I'm not with it. But either way,
don't be sleeping on that, man. Don't be sleeping on that.
I watched the first half of a season.
Let me say this, man. Let me say this. Billy Bob Thornton has got to be one of the most fortunate dudes you will ever see in acting. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously, like in his real life, he had Angelina Jolie at some point. And in his acting life, he's got Ali Lauder. I mean, damn, man. Damn.
He's not struggling. But sometimes, as I say, you got to create your own luck. We'll have to debrief about that another time. But I go away for a week, dog, and it's like there were some really amazing games that happened in the course of the week, like that Heat Cavs game, with the Wiggins, thing, and then Curry going nuclear in San Antonio. Like, there were some really great things that happened. But we are not here talking about and celebrate the magnificent play of basketball here on this week's show. We're here to talk about teams who don't have their proverbial shit together. And, it's going to be really interesting to kind of go through four teams in the Western Conference who are just, I like to say, withering in the West. That's going to be my little tagline for this episode.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation that we're going to have, Shaw, because listen, we were on our previews and we've had, guests come on to give us their perspective of what was going on. And by all accounts, everyone still believed that the Western Conference arguably is going to be head and shoulders the better conference. But when we talk about these four teams, it kind of begs to wonder, like, under what criteria are we grading these struggles, right? Like, these are some real actual struggles that can have long-term effects, no matter how you slice it. But they have all of these teams have been a part of the playoff fabric of the Western Conference in some way, shape, or form over the last, 5 to 10 years. And so now, if those teams are no longer going to be relevant, right? Like, what are we saying about what the Western Conference is going to look like by the time we get to the end of the season? And I think the thing that we were saying, Shaw, is that the Western Conference is so highly contested that even if teams like this are struggling, they still may be within striking distance to upset the apple cart or change the narrative about what the the playoff picture may look like. The way that these teams look currently, and with the issues that we're going to be addressing for each of these teams respectively, hit a different note about where these teams might wind up landing. You know what I'm saying? By the time we get to the end of the season, which I find, pretty remarkable. The only team that we can say it in the Eastern Conference that we know is not going anywhere are the Brooklyn Nets. But by all accounts, I don't think we would have ever thought that we would have this early a conversation about the teams we're talking about in the Western Conference.
Yeah, there's so many things to dive into, unpack from your statements alone, and then again, just like the last week and a half of NBA action. And I think we are due, ironically, I'm going to tease next week's episode a little bit. Our brother Jabari will be back up in the joint here, and I think it'll be the appropriate time to talk-ish or abandon ship. I think that'll be perfect since we had him on one of our preview shows and primarily talking about the Western Conference. So it makes a lot of sense here to kind of dive into that next week. But for this week's show, there's a lot of, again, these four teams here that don't have their proverbial stuff together right now. And I cannot wait to get some of your insight, as we haven't had a chance since I was out to really kind of dive into what's going on with some of these rosters.
Absolutely. So big, the big to-do that we're going to basically be addressing is the four teams in the Western Conference who have, really been in the eye of the proverbial NBA, newswire storm, the Dallas Mavericks, the, New Orleans Pelicans, the LA Clippers, and the Sacramento Kings. So we'll be addressing each of these teams in our current edition of the Baseline. As always, be sure to get at my man at D Warren Shaw or me at Game Face Lead, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. You can go to www.thebaselinenba.com to not only check this episode out, but also the archive of episodes that we have been laying out for you for your listening pleasure. And if you're catching us on the YouTube channel, we'd like to say hello to you and yours. And if you see the blue and white logo down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen or lower right-hand corner of your screen, let's let you know that we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, we run in these content streets. So you can go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check us, but also the great content creators that are a part of the 19 Media Group family. Special shout out to our peoples, millions.co. Be sure to check out the episode if you love to. Some of our clips and amazing stuff that we capture can also be found on millions.co. So be sure to check those people out as we partnered with them for all of our social media streamings as well, too. Coming up, Shaw and I will get into the digs, what's happening in the Western Conference. But so that you know, this episode of The Baseline is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. This basketball season, I've been having a blast making lineups. It's super simple and quick. Here's how it works. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you get them right, you can cash in. You can even use the new stacks feature to pick the same player up to 3 times in one lineup, like more on Steph's three-pointers and his assists. I've been checking out the projections for Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, and Tyrese Maxey lately, and trust me, seeing them hit is the chef's kiss. PrizePicks also has injury reboots and fast, secure withdrawals with Venmo, Apple Pay, and more. So what are you waiting for? Download the PrizePicks apps today and use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Coming up, Shaw and I dig into what's happening in the Western Conference. Don't miss it here on The Baseline. We are back. Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And as we were mentioning earlier before, a lot of craziness has been going on in the NBA circuit, the NBA story circuit, as it pertains to teams in the Western Conference. And really, 3 of the 4 teams that we'll be talking about are teams that, we anticipated they may go through some early struggles and be predicated on whether or not the team would stay healthy. But there are far more sort of issues now that have been surfacing in reference to what's taking place with these teams. And the first team, though, that we're going to talk about, though, we had already walked into, not really high expectations, but we knew that they were at least going to try to be a competitive team. Well, to say the least, the New Orleans Pelicans are a team that's just absolutely come out the gate, struggling, and really there's no way for us to kind of even get an idea what the future may look like for this team. And now with the most recent news of the Pelicans relieving Willie Green of his head coaching duties, it really starts putting the onus back again on why so many setbacks when it comes to the New Orleans Pelicans, and what does their future actually look like? Shaw, I know you wanted to, kind of get my perspective on this. I've said from Jump Street that I expected this New Orleans Pelicans team to struggle. I expected them to kind of, not really have a particular competitive season, in the sense that you're asking Willie Green, to make this team something that clearly they are not a reflection of. And it's interesting because now you get rid of Willie Green, who by my accounts has done quite admirable job of coaching a team that really had no business, being put together the way that it was being put together, because you clearly can tell that there's a disconnect between what the coach sees as, the future of this organization and what the organization sees as the future of its organization. And so, yeah, maybe in a way, I'm kind of happy that the Pelicans let Willie Green go. Maybe he can find and work with an organization that actually believes in him enough to actually allow him to, 1, coach, and 2, put pieces around him that are going to allow him to coach the way that I think we saw in the early stages of when he was the head coach for the New Orleans Pelicans, and you thought that they were in sync with what they were trying to put together.
The thing for me about Willie Green is his tenure in New Orleans is mired and tethered to that of Zion Williamson. Like that team, the franchise can only be so successful when you make a draft pick of that ilk and that guy plays, 10 to 15, 20 games a year. And so Willie Green may have lost the proverbial locker room. And I think for about a week into the season, we started to see signs of that, right? Like it seemed like they quit on him. A less than Celtics team came in there and beat them by 40. Then they think they got beat by 40 again the very next night as well. That's a sign of a team that just like it doesn't care anymore. But again, Zion has only played 5 of the 12 games the Pelicans have been able to play in this year or have this year. So between that, the front office doing whatever they're doing, acquiring Jordan Poole for whatever reason, and Sadiq Bey, and like just kind of this mismatch of pieces. Remember, DeJounte Murray still hasn't played now in over a year. Like, I don't really know what Willie Green was supposed to do with this, but what we do know and what continues to stay true is that when a team struggles out the gate like this, the first person to go is the head coach. And I think that's what we have here with Willie Green. While everyone's like, well, we saw it coming, they're not playing, they're not responding. I get all of those things, but this is one of those firings. Well, yeah, I understand how it had to happen, but I don't necessarily blame Willie Green specifically. He's played some mercurial and curious lineups, I think, at times, but I think he, at some point, you become a mad scientist because you never know who the hell is going to be available. Like this guy's injured all the time, in and out of the lineups and out of the roster. And I don't know, man, they're bad. They're bad. They are in the bottom third, like 25th to 30th in almost every statistical category you can think of that is of any relevance. So somebody had to bite the bullet here, and unfortunately that was Willie Green. But I don't know that James Borrego, is a new interim coach or new coach with Joe D kind of up in the front office. If anything's going to get any better here in New Orleans, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know you have a clip that you're going to kind of highlight with regards to Borrego now assuming head coaching duties, but I wanted to chime in on something that you were just talking about, Shaw, because it's something that I feel it seems too easy for organizations to turn around and fire somebody, 15 games, a quarter into the season, right? Unless there is a proper context that is being laid out for our understanding as to why this happened, right? And, back in the day, if it was something like this that happened, it's because, and it was probably going to get released, like some news reporter probably has the goods on this, and the organization found a way to keep him from actually leaking it out before before they actually, take their necessary actions and things of that nature, and you find out there's a large scandal happening and things of that nature. I'm like going back, talking about like, Carlissimo and Spreewell and, other, entanglements that have happened, with notable head coaches, right? Or coaches that have had the respect, whether it be the organization and the players, and then some type of disconnect or something happens and it changes the whole scope of this and or the perception of what we think about. But what I think about this situation that happened here, where I feel like, okay, if you're going to fire Willie Green, it's because the team can neither defend or the team cannot score, right? They can't do either well, right? But to what you're saying, I think a lot of that is focused on when your roster is constructed with only the type of players that can do either or of those things. Now you're asking a head coach to take the other necessary players and make them into things that they may not have been selected, signed on for, traded in for, whatever the case may be. And you're asking them to do it, not just in an off season, you're asking them to do it somewhere mid 10 games into the season, you know what I'm saying, after recognizing that you're not working with the actual roster that you were supposed to have when you started in training camp. You know what I'm saying? And at times, I just don't understand how the organization thinks that now by firing the head coach, that there's suddenly going to be this, come to Jesus moment by the players, that they're going to suddenly get better or look competitive. In other words, by doing it, the reflection is now back on you as the organization, because to your point and what you said earlier, Shaw, you guys can't seem to get your ish together. You see what I'm saying? And I think that to me is the sad part about it. If people were expecting Willie Green to tie his career on the wagons of a Zion Williamson, I don't think he would have taken that job. There's no way he would have taken that job, because anything and everything that we question about Zion Williamson, you would never question about Willie Green. So that's the thing that, to me, it just galls me when I see that they make a play like this or they do something like this, and we don't have context as to what transpired with regards to why we think now firing Willie Green at this moment in time will be better for the organization, better for the team, and better for the fans as far as what the Pelicans are expected to look like from now until whatever the next decision is made, or till the end of the regular season.
Yeah, I got to say something too, real quick. When it comes to this, the governorship, it's been well touted that the governorship, the Bensons, if you will, they're not amazing. I think they own they own the Saints in the NFL as well too, and the Pelicans, and both those organizations are known for, I don't know, cutting corners when it comes to the medical staff and just maybe a little bit less than in terms of the overall facilities, and things are just not right from the top all the way down. And now with the new, executive leadership team in terms of basketball operations and decisions that they've made, it just doesn't smell right for me at all. Now, again, I'm not saying that Willie Green didn't deserve, in essence, to be let go. And maybe this is like, almost like Shawshank Redemption for him. He's going through the shit to kind of get to the other side. Like, hey, maybe he's free. He's disabused of this really, really, really rough organization and all the trouble that has come along with it. But really, if they were looking at themselves, looking at the roster that they've built, the way that players cannot stay healthy, I wouldn't have been opposed to them, not necessarily having a fire sale, but looking at exhausting other options, right? And then maybe even, and I don't say give Willie Green the choice per se, but it's like, you know what? We're going to go in a different direction, Willie Green. We're going to trade Herb Jones and maybe see what we can get for Trey Murphy, maybe even Zion, right? And ultimately try to go just a completely different direction. And do you want to be on here for the rebuild or not? I think in some ways that might have made, at least me, would have been more palatable, but I understand how this business works, and that, again, when you're bottom third and literally almost everything that matters, something has to change. And unfortunately, it ended up being Willie Green. And I'm going to kind of like switch gears real quick right now, because Borrego, I don't think he's throwing shots at Willie Green in his introductory press conference or at the first practice, if you will, with him as head coach. But listen to this clip. It's about a minute long, CL, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on what James Borrego said. See if you pick up on some of the things I did as well, too.
Who are we? That's what we have to identify, and it's not going to happen overnight. Tomorrow night's going to be some magic wand. I wave, and we have this magic identity. It's going to take, it's a process. It's day by day. It's our habit work, how we communicate, how we work on the floor. Obviously, it starts with me and giving clarity and direction on players' roles. I have met with players. I don't have all the answers for them right now, but I tried to share as much as I can with them, where they stand, where I'm at, and how I see this team moving forward.
What's the identity that you want this team to have?
Well, I think it's an identity that really resembles our community. It's resilient, it's tough, it has pride, it's aggressive. And I think identity-wise, it starts there, just an overall physical, aggressive group that plays with force, that plays together. I'm a big believer in playing together, sharing the ball, moving the ball. Last time I was in the seat, my team led the NBA in assists. I believe in trusting it, sharing it. I grew up under the San Antonio Spurs, where people moved the ball, shared the ball, and trusted it.
So, I'll let you know right now, the Pelicans are 30th out of 30 teams in assists. So, it says to me that Borrego doesn't feel like this team knows how to share the basketball, but they also don't have relevant play creators as well, too. So I don't know if that's a shot at Willie Green or a shot at the overall culture of this team, or just his overall impressions and saying, you know what, I can come here and do this better. Your thoughts on Borrego's comments?
The first thing that really jumped out at me was him saying, what's our identity?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? What do you mean, what's our identity? So in other words, the whole time that Willie Green was the head coach and you were the assistant head coach, you didn't get inside Willie Green's ear to identify the fact that this team didn't have an identity. I thought that you would already knew that and you were on board with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that's the last thing I think I would want to be saying out loud, regardless if you're struggling as a basketball team. It's questioning your heart and questioning who you are. If you're questioning the talent and the roster and it's your responsibility to coach them up, okay, you can speak to those particular things. But to say, well, we need to know who we are, you should have known that. That's why you're the assistant head coach, just as the same as Willie Green was the head coach. Then he starts talking about saying, oh, well, we need to be aggressive. We need to be physical. What the hell, man? You never bothered watching Willie Green when he used to play for the teams that he played for? He didn't have to be a superstar. He among one of those guards were one of the more physical two-way players that played in our generation. He believed in that. And he wanted that for all of his guys, even skinny little Brandon Ingram. He wanted him to bow up on guys and not play scared. You know what I'm saying? So again, I understand that it's quote unquote camera speak, how he's laying these type of things out. But if he really listened to how he sounded exactly like Willie Green when he first came on as a New Orleans Pelican. The problem is that the players that he has and the roster that's been constructed don't exhibit those same factors and traits that you're saying that these guys don't have. And what's ironic is you've had these guys now for over 2-3 years, you know what I'm saying? Minus Jordan Poole, who is completely the opposite of everything that you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? So, again, I'm not here to nitpick on that part of it. I think the part that disturbs me more than anything about what James Borrego was saying is the fact that he's addressing the very things that we already know are the struggles for the Pelicans. I think the thing that came into play here is, what is it that you're going to do differently that Willie Green couldn't obviously get out of these guys when this season has started? And I don't know whether or not
to be fair, he's also saying that he's like, I don't have it all figured out yet. Because again, it's like literally day 2, I think, when that interview take place of the firing. And now he's like, hey, I'm thrust into the seat. So I don't think he was preying on Willie Green's job. So now he's got to go here and try to figure it out.
No, but I'm not saying he was doing that either, Shaw.
To your point, I think there is some things there that seems like there's a disconnect. Because when you come in there, you're talking about having to reestablish an identity and figure out your culture as a roster and an organization. When you've already been there, it's not like you came in from the outside. So you've been on the bench this entire time. That, to me, that's why this doesn't smell like this is going to automatically turn around. Sure. Maybe he'll throw a couple more minutes to Derek Queen or whatever the case would be. Maybe Fears will play more or whatever. And then he'll get DeJounte Murray to come back in January or February. I don't think those are the elixirs per se. But to me, I don't love the way this is starting. And I respect Borrego. I think he's a good coach. He's a guy who's been he's been sought after here in the last couple of years as well, too, for various opportunities. So I think his coaching acumen is on point. But I think this was an interesting start to the post-Willie Green era in New Orleans.
If this was Doc Rivers, right, coming out from the outside circle to take over Adrian Griffin's job, and he's saying what he's saying, I would not have any problem with it. You know what I'm saying? Because Doc Rivers wasn't involved in the machinations about how this team needed to be handled and constructed or whatever the case may be.
Doc Rivers was a consultant for the Bucks.
he was a consultant, but he wasn't among the assistant head coaches. What I'm saying is that he isn't a part of the inner circle like Borrego is. What I'm illustrating is that when you make those type of comments, you are directly saying, well, as much as I like Willie Green, it's obvious that he didn't have an identity for this team. Well, but you're a part of that team. You're a part of that part of the circle. And again, I'm speaking to that to use that and highlight us as saying, if somebody from the outside is making those particular comments from what they've seen, whether you're a consultant or you're someone that's part of the executive level, but you're not there in the intimate details, the planning and everything like that, working with that roster, working with these guys, he's there. So that's the reason why I'm speaking more to, he could have selected better word choice in how he's addressing that without airing it out as to say, well, yeah, I can't tell you what was going on with Willie Green and why this isn't trend, but this is what I'm saying is what's happening, and you were there.
Yeah, 1,000%. So before we move on, I think Alvarado's name is being mentioned in trade rumors right now.
And they're doing more trading than really getting, like Alvarado would be the last person that I'm thinking about trying to move right now. If you want to move something, move guys who clearly don't fit, quote unquote, the identity of what you're talking about.
Well, and we'll figure out who that is, I think, in short order. But Murphy, Jones, Alvarado, all those guys have interests, around the league. I don't think Sadiq Bey has much value right now. He's trying to rebuild his value there. He's Messi not looking good in his second year right now, but maybe that's Willie Green's fault for all they know. Jordan Hawkins been buried on the bench. He's a guy who can definitely fill it up, but he just fell into Willie Green's doghouse this year, it seemed like. So there's a lot that can happen. And as we talk about these other teams here, trading is going to be probably the next biggest conversation that happens with all of them. Like, hey, who can we move? What is it time to reset? So I think this is just kind of the impetus of the conversation in New Orleans. They changed the coach, but I think roster moves ultimately need to happen here for this team to actually make a step forward.
Shaw, I'm going to tell you this right now. We can move on to our next team that we're going to discuss. This is not going to change until there is a clear distinction about who is leading this team on the basketball court, and it can't be Zion Williamson. I'm saying that so that, there's no misconceptions. You may not feel that way, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who love Zion Williamson who think I'm an idiot for saying it. But I'm telling you right now, of all of the messed up transactions that the Pelicans have had, and they've been notorious now. Now we're going on 2 decades. Have been notorious for screwing up certain plays and moves and things. Sometimes their fault, sometimes not their fault. I'm telling you right now, you're holding on to a player who I don't think will ever match what you're looking for. Is not your elixir. I think you are best suited to move on from him, get what you can, start from zero. You've got some really good young pieces that I think you can work with. That they don't have Zion freak athlete, whatever, but they could probably go out there and compete. They can go out there and score. They can give you something of what you can build on. I don't think you can build anymore with this idea of hoping and praying that Zion Williamson will be where you think he's going to be even the next, even for this year. Move on from him, because that to me is what's holding. I'm going to tell you this right now. This is what's going to hold Borrego back. If he has to rest his laurels on the hope that he's going to turn things around for Zion Williamson, oh my. Get ready for another show that we're going to have.
The biggest thing here is not even just the locker room thing. Is like turn things around for Zion Williamson is him playing games. I mean, just being on the floor. So when he's there, fine, he's productive. It works. It's great for the most part. I mean, statistically, he doesn't always result in wins, but he gives them a better chance to win when he's out there. Statistically, he's just not there. And Borrego can't fix that. Like, that has nothing to do with Borrego. It had nothing to do with Willie Green either.
But when
franchise,
Zion,
to your point, and we got to move on. To your point, they do absolutely need to move on with Zion Williamson. I 1,000% agree with you.
Because they're not going to get their assists. They're not gonna move up on the chain if they're still settling on their superstar. Okay, let's go ahead and let's move forward to the LA Clippers. And I think you believe in the idea here that what we're talking about with the struggles with the LA Clippers is more of, because the stars are not available, it has put Tyronn Lue in quote unquote a tenable position. Because again, he has to make magic happen with the roster that he has. However, the roster that he has is never consistently healthy enough to be competitive on the court. So the question becomes, are the Clippers too old or too slow? And look, we've both said that Tyronn Lue is a great coach, but there's really nothing that you can do when guys are not available on the basketball court. And if you've built your offense, you've built your team around those star players, around the availability of those star players, and they're not available, then you leave yourself to chance to go through the struggles that the LA Clippers are currently going through.
I think Ty Lue, Willie Green, and the ghosts, if you will, of Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, they could all have a powwow when it comes to, they're having the availability of their players over the last X amount of years. And I think Lue has already expressed his frustration with dealing with Kawhi back in the day, PG, et cetera, et cetera. But now this team went in a certain direction. They wanted to be experienced. They are extremely veteran. They're the oldest team in the NBA. And it's absolutely showing here in the beginning of the season. The way they opened the year, getting their doors absolutely blown the F off by the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz of all teams blew them out by 4. I was like, what is happening? Game 1, I mean, but it's not like a matter of rest back to back. It was the first night of the season. You got your doors blown off by the Utah Jazz. I don't know, man. This Clippers organization is one that you want to believe. The roster moves seem to make sense, with all the veteran guys. But we haven't even talked about Bradley Beal's now done for the year. Done. Done. He's out of there. It's a wrap. So all that machinations, they move Norm Paul out of there only for Beal to come there and last like 6 games. Like, it's apocalyptic. Lue, while a good coach, is also now again facing the hot seat. I think as you alluded to, but they are bad. And the one thing I said is that their defense, we knew it was going to slip some. They were top 5 last year. They're like 22nd right now, and it's that type of slippage has you in the conversations that they're in right now, where they're completely struggling and they don't look like there's really much sign of hope. But Kawhi should be back. Maybe that will turn things around. They're 4-8 as we record. Harden is off a ridiculous triple-double and a crazy overtime game, etc. You feel like there's just too much veteran leadership and competence for it to be this bad. But right now, I don't know. My eyebrow is definitely raised on the Clippers. So
the one thing I'm going to say about this, Shaw, is this highlights the generation gap of how teams prepare for the marathon that is the NBA season. Okay. I think maybe a couple of years ago, if we had talked about, the Utah Jazz blew the brakes off of the Los Angeles Clippers, that we'd been like, wow, this is a great day for the Utah Jazz. We might actually see some talent on that roster. And then if we're talking about the LA Clippers, it'd be like, yeah, hey man, it's game 1. They're not worried about it. You know what I'm saying? They got another 81 games left to go. They'll figure it out. They'll turn it around. But look at how we're talking about what has happened to this LA Clippers team playing against a team like the Utah Jazz and then getting blown out by 40 points. Because I think for most of those veterans, right, they still are in that's just game 1, man. We'll get this turned around. We'll figure this out. And you keep saying that. Then next thing you know, we're already at NBA All-Star weekend, right? And now we're more than halfway into the season and you're still hovering around at 7-8 seed, maybe a game or 2 behind to get into the play-in. You know what I'm saying? And so now you start beginning into wonders of, when do I have that on switch? When can I just flick this on? I've been playing in this league for some 10, 15, 20 years, right? Or however long. I know that there's a switch that we can kick into gear and get ourselves on track. And all we got to do is be hot at the right time when the playoffs happen. But then you start thinking back on some of these games that you wound up losing to. You start realizing that some of those teams that are younger than you, Shaw, actually are hanging around and are winning relevant basketball games and are actually rubbing shoulders up against you in the standings and making things very interesting, when all the while your expectation is, I flip that switch and suddenly I'm a 4 seed in the Western Conference. It's just not like that anymore, man. And I think that's the stark reality of it. And it goes back to something that I think we're going to talk about with regards to Willie Green. That might be the bigger question. When you don't have your star players, what are you doing for those next man up guys? Have they elevated themselves to no longer just be guys you bring in, 5, 7, 10-minute patches? Are they people who actually should have meaningful minutes as part of the roster? Or do they get suppressed again the minute that your superstar comes back? And that's a hard decision to make, because if you take minutes away from a guy who's not reliable because you have to so believe in that superstar getting in there, you get questioned for that because you decided to pull that guy when he could have been meaningful for you during those important stretches of games. And so now I think this is what's going to put him on the hot seat because of it.
Yeah, the Clippers wanted to be led by Kawhi, James Harden, being the number 2, and they kind of doing it by committee. Zubac still playing pretty well this season, averaging a double-double again. I think we're going to see that for the rest of his career, or for at least for the foreseeable future. But to me, it's just a way that, because they are so slow and they are older, they don't have the ability to defend in the same way. And that's where they're really losing a lot of these basketball games. And I misspoke. I think the Jazz were up by as many as 40, and the Clippers closed the gap, if you will, to end up losing by like a little over 20. But either way, for some reason, they played the Suns 3 times already, and they're 1-2 against the Phoenix Suns, who are surprisingly good, which is a conversation for another show. But Chris Paul, getting some DNCPs, if you will, from Lue right now. 2 points a game in like 12 minutes when he does play.
And again, that's what I'm saying. It's highlighting certain moves and the way you're going about deploying and utilizing your roster that I think is going to resonate with whether or not leadership is going to say we're going to have to go in a different direction.
Yeah, and this is not a team that's going to be able to do a lot with, any of the main guys on this roster. Kawhi Leonard, 34 years old. Yes, all the accolades that he has, but who'd be trading for that? Like who's going to take a risk with that? With Uncle Dennis looming in the background and Aspire or not? Like who would be going for that? Like nobody. So the Clippers are kind of lion locked into this roster, I think, for right now. And of the teams that we're going to talk about, and maybe we can shave this point to the end, but I feel like maybe there's some hope. And, maybe we're, just it's 12 games in and it hasn't looked good. And Kawhi's only played 6 of the 12. So maybe there's hope there, but it's not amazing right now for the LA Clippers. And they have a lot of ground to make up here in a very loaded Western Conference. But they got to get their defense together. Like they absolutely got their defense together and figure out ways, in essence, to get easier shots offensively as well, too. Because right now they're in the 20th rating, I think 22nd in offensive rating. Like this is nothing what anybody signed up for in Clipperland.
But I think we've said this so many times before, Shaw, right? Like offense can make you look so young. Defense can make you look so old. Okay. And
well,
they're not going to get any, they're not going to get any younger.
Offensive defensive rating.
But they're not going to get any younger defensively. You know what I'm saying? Not unless you decide to replace the players who are giving you all of that offense with guys who are going to be able to stay with the younger guys that are generating that offense from the opposing teams. You know what I'm saying? So there has to be a collective effort by this Clippers team to play better defensive basketball, but you're asking them to do that with another 60-something, 65 games left to play. Like again, that's tough sledding. And I'm telling you right now, it just feels like they think that they have an on switch once they get everybody together, that they can flip it and it can suddenly make them a better team defensively. They suddenly become this competitive team that we keep talking about during the middle of the year. Oh, watch out for the Clippers. They're the most dangerous team. I don't think anybody ever questions when those guys are on that they'll be the most dangerous team. But I think we're questioning, is it sustainable? And can they stay healthy enough for them to be able to show that when it matters the most? And we've seen that's not been the case for the Clippers.
It is not. So, shout out to the LA Clippers, man. We rooting for you, I guess. We don't.
Well, I know who won't be rooting for him, and he's coming next week. He's coming next week to put an exclamation point on that.
Well, we won't. We don't like to see our old veterans, kind of going down, kind of in a blaze, right? Like you want to see them kind of age gracefully. It's not happened in the way that the Clippers would certainly like right now. But we're 12 games in, so maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit. But there are some signs, and with the rumors now starting that Lue might be on the hot seat, I thought it was worth bringing up here today. But there's still time for the Clippers to turn things around.
It'd be interesting if they did fire Tyronn Lue, though, because I feel like, again, with this Clippers team, the best option you have available to coach through a lot of this is going to be him. So if you're entertaining the idea of getting rid of him, wherever that or whenever that might be, I mean, if you want to sabotage whatever you've been trying to do, especially moving into that new arena and everything like that, hey, have at it. But I would not suggest doing such a thing at this particular moment in time. Ride or die with Tyronn Lue through this, and then if obviously you see that this team does not even look like a team that can be competitive by the time that the season ends, you know what I'm saying? I think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they'll be in the playoffs or play-in, playoffs, whatever the case may be. But to get rid of Tyronn Lue because of what we've been saying has been, the elephant in the room with this Clippers team already. I find it amusing. I find it amusing. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics on the NBA. Coming up, we got 2 more teams to drop on our conversations with their struggles in the Western Conference. Don't miss it here on The Baseline.
You've earned this. Now it's time to embark on your own personal adventure. Book your vacation with Exquisite Travel and Tours today. Explore the world and discover yourself.
We are back, Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and our conversations of teams that are struggling in the Western Conference, teams that over the last couple of years have been relevant in the Western Conference playoff picture. And so the next team that we're going to discuss is going to be the Sacramento Kings. And ironically enough, we had said this in our preview that the Sacramento Kings, AKA the Sacramento Bulls, right? We knew that this was probably going to be a disaster waiting to happen, right? Because it just didn't click right with what Levine DeRozan were giving you in Chicago to translate it over to Sacramento because you're pairing them up with Domantas Sabonis. I think the bigger question wasn't going to be who would be compromised between DeRozan and Levine. It's what would this do to Domantas Sabonis and the kind of player that he has been for the Sacramento Kings over the last couple of years. Will this enhance, accentuate his actual skill set, the kind of multi-tool player that he is, or will it diminish it because of the fact that the ball has to go to the other players that you went and gave up assets and did all of this nonsense to put this team together for? And essentially, you just basically usurp the potential of what you had when you had Fox into Sabonis. Now with Sabonis, you don't even know what you have, and this team is struggling to boot.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Sabonis is kind of trying to do what he usually does, but doesn't have the same faculties in essence to do it because of the rosters is so much different. And DeRozan and Levine they need the ball in essence to be successful. While Fox obviously did too. Fox allowed Sabonis to facilitate even more than he did, right? And Levine and DeRozan do a lot of kind of one-on-one and isolation type stuff. So it's not really working out in the same way. Sabonis is still figuring out a way to get, I think it's like, roughly, oh my God, his assists are down to 3.6 this year. That is crazy. I'm sorry. I'm actually.
By the way, people, he's not laughing at that. He's like shocked. Like that's his shock face.
I'm processing it in real time. And while Sabonis is struggling with his own injury concerns as it is, there's also a limitation to who he is in terms of a ceiling raiser for an organization. So you throw just kind of ball hungry, needy type guys into this mix with a guy who needs to play in a very, very particular type of way, and you get the 3-10 start. The bottom third, again, same thing. We're talking about all these things. They're all in the bottom third of every major statistical category. The Kings, one thing they do play fast. They play the 5th highest pace right now. But I don't know what the Kings are going to ultimately need to do here. Levine's efficiency is still there. It's not resulting in winning. He's shooting 24 a game, getting 24 games, shooting 42% from the 3-point line, 51% from the floor. Counting stats look amazing, but they're not winning. And at the end of the day, I think this Kings team does really need to look at what it means to maybe reset and start to sell off some of these assets. And they're not building around anybody. I was listening to another podcast and I was like, damn, this is 1,000% correct. Who on this roster are you like, yes, that's the guy? And I know Keegan Murray hasn't come back and hasn't played yet as well too. But who are you building around? Everyone on this team should be, I'd pick up the phone call and say, hey, well, let me know what you're thinking. You know what I mean?
Wasn't it a few years ago that we were talking about the potential of Domantas Sabonis and the way that his game is set up to be an MVP level kind of type player? I'm not saying that he ever had like MVP numbers, but what he can give you in points, assists, and rebounds, statistically in and of itself, could have put him easily in the conversation had he still been playing next to De'Aaron Fox and still had Mike Brown possibly as his head coach. And suddenly all of that has gone away. All of that is gone away. And a lot of it is because of the kind of players that he's playing around, right? And you can clearly tell that while they're 5th in pace, all of that frenetic pace means nothing because they're ineffective shooting the basketball, right? They're among the worst, I believe, like as far as offensive efficiency goes. And it's not so much the fact that my problem is saying, okay, are we saying that Zach Levine sucks or DeMar DeRozan sucks? No. I think what we're saying, though, is that for how those two guys have been playing basketball in the NBA for as long as they've been playing, you're now asking them to play next to someone who played a certain kind of way. And in essence, it's either they come down a level with their mindset and their way of scoring, or they figure out a way to elevate the person that they are playing next to. And it's just tough, man. It just really is. And it's sad because I think the one thing that stands out with all of these guys, and you had basically just said that a moment ago, Shaw, who are you building around, right? Like in winning moments, who is actually getting that basketball, right? I just feel like these are quality players that can get you to a certain level, but when it's called upon to take over a game, to elevate the team to another level, you're not going to see that in any of these guys. And it's not so much the fact that there's not a potential there. I just think that the situations and the way that this team is structured and the way that this team plays, neither one of them are going to get that opportunity to do it. And it's unfortunate because, again, this was the same Sacramento Kings team that was just in the play-ins last year. This is the same Sacramento Kings team that was in the playoffs a couple of years ago. And it's now, again, we're back on that trend where the Kings are slowly but surely falling off the grid.
Well, same team in name, not same team in roster. Levine and DeRozan were not here. And the other thing about the Sabonis situation is that they've added high ball handling point guards in some ways who are also a little bit inefficient in Dennis Schroeder and Russell Westbrook. Those guys are playing, big minutes for this Kings team, almost 30 a night for each of them. So that's also cutting into Sabonis' ability to be effective as a playmaker as well. This Kings roster does not fit. We all saw that going in and knew that, but didn't think it was going to be this bad. I think we're headed towards some semblance of maybe not so much a fire sale, but a sale of some sort. You know what I mean? It's going to be some sort of liquidation. It's like, all right, you know what? We got to get some things out of here and try to reset the table. But again, who is the building block here? And
but even if you do that, Shaw, even if you do that, who moves? Who would you move first? Right?
I think Sabonis probably gets you the most because I think the book is out on Lavine right now in terms of like great guy, but at that number as well too. Remember, he's going to be 47, I think it is, or something like that for the next 2 years. Like, that's a lot for somebody who, while efficient, is not producing winning basketball for whatever the reason. DeRozan has a large cachet, but he's 36 years old, so you're not going to get a lot of valuable assets for them. I think Sabonis at 29 and the guy that he is, a multiple-time All-Star, maybe you can fetch and convince somebody to say, you know what, this makes sense for us here. I don't know who that team is. Like maybe a Charlotte, maybe they do that, to get a power forward, a play creating guy to take some pressure off LaMelo, build around Brandon Miller as well too when he comes back. Concanopoulos looks pretty good right now too. So I don't know. I'm just throwing a team out there that comes to mind. But yeah, I think Sabonis is the guy, or your guy. Maybe you do sell the parts of Keegan Murray and see if somebody's willing to see, hey, you know what? He hasn't really popped in the way that we thought he was supposed to in Sacramento, but he's got to build his value back coming off of injury. But those are the two guys I think can get them something of value. While Levine and DeRozan, sure, maybe somebody will take a flyer on them, but you're not going to do anything to really reset your table if you're Sacramento.
I want to believe in Domantas Sabonis and his fit with the Sacramento Kings. If he believes that he can make a difference and be that guy, then I think if you're the Kings, you do what you need to do to move DeRozan and you move Levine. I think there's something possibly there with Westbrook and Sabonis. I think you can at least get something there maybe for the next year or so. And while you're retooling, really focus in and hone in on getting the next 3 or 4 years, of what Sabonis could have potentially been since he's been a Sacramento King. You know what I'm saying? What they were trying to do with De'Aaron Fox. I don't think it's too late for that. But if Domantas Sabonis is checked out, if the organization itself is checked out on whatever their intentions are, then I would agree with you. You're going to get the most bang for your buck moving Sabonis at this particular junction. Then to your point, that means the next man up is going to be Keegan Murray. And because you cannot afford to give away both of those guys. That's just not a good look. Because no matter what you do with Levine and DeRozan, you're never going to get the kind of assets that are going to pan out the same way, knowing that you gave up your 2 young future star players after already players in De'Aaron Fox, regardless of what De'Aaron Fox's career looks like this point forward. So it'll be interesting to see what the Sacramento Kings do. I just hope that they figure things out and they don't look as bad as how they've been looking recently. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Final team for us to discuss, Shaw, it's going to be, you guessed it, the Dallas Mavericks. And I'm sure everybody has been talking about the firing of Nico Harrison. They've been talking about all of the possible fallout that has taken place that drove the decision to do so, the vitriol, everything that goes into it. But when you really just even from that in of itself, the Mavericks have just not looked like a good basketball team. And, you know, firing him, I'm sure, gives relief to some people, but it ain't going to relieve the stench of how bad this team basically looks on the basketball court. And then you couple that with another injury to AD. You know, you couple that with the struggles that this team has had. You know, Cooper Flagg has obviously been, you know, he doesn't reflect that of the excitement of him being the number one selected player in the draft. And so now it just feels like it's just all come off. We talk about the Dallas Mavericks.
It's unfortunate. It really is. But maybe a couple months too late or too early, depending on. So I think doing it now seems a little weird. While a lot of people are not necessarily surprised it happened, I think the timing is still like, oh, well, if you didn't fire him in the summer after the Luka trade, then you get Cooper Flagg. Well, then why not let it play out? So this 3-10 start, because AD is now hurt again, because you shouldn't have AD on your roster anyway, but PJ Washington missed time, and Kyrie is obviously still hurt as well too. So, but for whatever reason, Jason Kidd is unscathed in kind of all of this, which is interesting. I don't believe that he deserves a lot of blame, but there's just been some peculiar things that have happened here. So I'm sure Nico thought landing Cooper Flagg was going to be like, yes, you know what I mean? I told y'all, look, now, you know, we're going to be heading towards in the positive direction. But this start has been awful. They're last in offensive rating. They're somehow still in the top 5 in defense. So credit to Jason Kidd for getting them to play defense, you know, to some degree. But I think the decision to put Cooper at the point guard, in addition to AD being out for the majority part of the season so far this year, has really just kind of like cooked Nico Harrison's proverbial goose. Then the coup de grace, because this happened while I was out, his firing gets announced basically like 2 hours before it actually happens. So, like, he's just like, oh, I guess I'm going to get fired today because Shams breaks the news. I feel like the Mavs did everything they could to try to embarrass him is on the way out. And then you get a letter from the governor of the team, and, you know, and he's more or less talking about, yeah, we made mistakes, whatever the case may be, and more or less pandering to the fan base that is upset about the firing. I can't recall an open letter to the fans based on a general manager's decision before, because ticket sales are down in Dallas as well too. Like, everything is going awry. This Mavericks team is in complete disarray.
Well, okay, so a couple of things on that part. First of all, you knew that was coming because you shouldn't have been jacking up the prices after you went ahead and traded your you know what I'm saying?
That was ambitious. That was
okay.
Ambitious.
No, but that's I'm gonna call it a buck, right? That's Dallas. Okay. That's how they do. That's how they are. You know what I'm saying? And if they were winning, they wouldn't care. They would be celebrating and dancing in the street. They don't care, right? It's money. It's whatever. It's the optics. It's you gave away the guy that I want to come see play, and you're still gonna charge me a ton of money. I give them credit that they actually took that to heart, and they actually took it in action in making sure that they didn't come out to support the Mavericks the same way. So I don't know if the owner is Patrick Dumont, I believe you said.
Yeah.
I don't believe the owner, you know, is as quote unquote genuine in his, you know, apology, so to speak, as him recognizing that he is just trying to save face for all of the miscalculated moves that have taken place. I'm gonna go to something, Shaw, that I feel is, again, we're in a different space because we've seen this is nothing new to us when we see a superstar player getting moved. I think the magnitude and the idea behind it, because there was very little context. Again, context matters. Or else if people really understood, then they wouldn't be like, why would you be surprised that it was or wasn't going to happen? If I'm a player and I've been acting a certain kind of way, doing certain kind of things that makes things very questionable, I don't think I would ever be surprised that I'm going to eventually get moved if the ownership realizes that in the long term, it's going to be detrimental. It's going to be something that they'll never be able to regain or recover from unless they take action now, right? The biggest pet peeve that we said regarding Nico Harrison was what he got in return for moving Luka Doncic. And we said there is no way you make that move unless you're getting a boatload of picks, because it can't be just on AD. Nowhere in AD's career has it ever been said that he would match what you were going to get from a Luka Doncic and what Luka Doncic had already built in his resume with the Dallas Mavericks. So that in and of itself is what I think hurt Nico Harrison more than anything. That's just me.
No, but I agree. Well, let me jump in from this lens as well too. So we live in a social media era, and this trade was covered literally by even people outside of the NBA. That's how seismic it was. So not to relitigate the trade itself on its basis and merits, I think what you said like just does need to be highlighted slightly, because even now you didn't get the super haul, right? But then to watch Luka transform his body, which may or may not have happened if he would have stayed in Dallas, right? But to him transform his body and now looking like a legitimate, I mean, he's always looked like a legitimate MVP candidate, but he's on another level this year, especially because the body has changed. But then the other guy, the other piece that most people are like, well, you should have at least got Austin Reeves back in that trade. To watch Austin Reeves going and playing like a near all-star as well too. This, like, I think that's just more wood on the fire of Nico Harrison. And that to me, while egregious, it's really interesting how that narrative is also playing out as well too, because it forces us to relitigate the trade again, right? Even though it's like, yeah, we know he should have got more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you watch what the Lakers are doing with parts, in essence, that Dallas had or should have potentially acquired in the trade, it makes it that much worse, I think, for Nico Harrison. And yeah, he's up out of here. So,
and then also the way that Nico Harrison handled the situation, right? The responses, how he like none of it was good. And again, if you're going to fire him for those things, I'm good with that. But again, on the basis of the trade itself, you know what, Luka fans, you should be thanking Nico. You can go ahead and tweet him a thank you, because now that put fuel in that man's fire for what you're seeing right now, currently playing for the Los Angeles Lakers. Because I don't think that happens if he still plays for the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas fans would have been completely happy. Him, you know what I'm saying, Dad Bob, Bear Belly and all out there playing the way that he was playing, you know what I'm saying, gassing out when he comes to the end of the season, falling short of playing at an MVP level, you know what I'm saying, and not deciding to play defense when needed to play defense. There's an accountability that superstars have, not just within themselves, but even in the community. And that was his wake-up call. And I'm glad he took action for us to be able to enjoy what we're currently seeing. And I hope it's sustainable. This is the first year we're seeing the new Doncic. So I don't know if this is sustainable for the whole year. But if this is how he's going to be on, he'll finally live up to what we've been saying he is potentially going to be every single year, which is an MVP candidate. And eventually he will get over the hump and win a championship. Now, with that being said, I just wanted to highlight one last thing, Shaw, about this whole situation regarding the struggle with the Mavs, because this is what this was about anyway. It wasn't just about Nico Harrison. But I'm going to go back to a move that the Dallas Mavericks made that, and again, I'm not sitting here ready to throw strays at a play. Please, I don't want that perception being out there. But we're going to make sure that it's being highlighted objectively so that it's understood about what we talk about the Mavericks. When the Mavericks went and got Klay Thompson, and let's remember, Klay Thompson is fresh off of being disrespected by the Golden State Warriors because he believed that he should have been paid as much money to play the level that he expected himself to be going out and doing for the Dallas Mavericks. Shaw, I think Klay Thompson would have been Klay Thompson had he still been playing for the Golden State Warriors. Whatever the motivation was that brought him to play for the Dallas Mavericks, money, whatever, I don't care what it is. He is not playing to that level. He never has been able to play that level. And it has forced Jason Kidd to have to do things, use and manipulate the roster to address a gap that was never a problem prior to that point. If it was a matter of talent, then you would have told me, go and get someone more talented than that guy. Klay Thompson has played at a level that is beneath the talent that they had in that position when Jason Kidd was coaching that basketball team. And to me, that has started the roller coaster ride of what we've been seeing now going on since then. Any move that they make has not been a move that has elevated or made the team better for it. And I'm not blaming Klay Thompson, but what I'm saying is this is what happens when you have two dynamically different agendas now not aligned with the reasons why you are coming on board to do what is necessary for this Dallas Mavericks team to be thriving, not just for the season that passed, but also for the season moving forward.
I'm going to push back only slightly. I don't think Klay's he hasn't tanked the value that they were getting, but I don't think he's risen it in the way that the Mavs were expecting, I think, at that position as well, too. He was supposed to be accelerant to a team that went to the finals the year before that, right? It was like, hey, now he's going to be out on the wing when Luka kicks out, when Kyrie drives and kicks or whatever. Wow, what a find to be able to have that. Klay still shot nearly 40% from 3 last year. It just doesn't feel like it. He shot 39%, but it just doesn't feel the same. Like the impact is so much different. And I think to your point, it's just like, well, it's not, he hasn't had the ability to raise the floor because he's not the same guy, especially on the defensive side, which I think the Mavs knew, Nico Harrison knew, going into it. But again, you knew that. And so how were you going to scheme to try to maybe appease some of that? I don't know that they've done a good job in that regard. But Klay's a proud guy, and, not to, denigrate him on his Hall of Fame career. He still played 72 games last year, and then also had to deal with Luka getting traded in the middle of the year as well, too. So right now it's looking real bad. It's looking real bad for him this year. And I know the Pat Beverly podcast and others are blaming his relationship with Meg Thee Stallion and whatever the hell else. Like, I'm not really into the pop culture stuff with any of that.
Yeah, man.
Klay's got to figure out a way, but Klay doesn't have table setters right now. And he's not effective at this stage of his career. He's never been a guy who's going to create his own shot.
Exactly.
So I'm not looking at Klay Thompson to be able to do a whole lot here, especially with AD out. AD's not drawing double teams for you. So we can't expect Klay to even look like how he did last year.
Shaw, real quick, everything you just said, thank you. Okay? Because, again, I am not questioning what Klay Thompson gives me offensively. I'm questioning what Klay Thompson would be giving me defensively. And unfortunately, Shaw, the position that Klay Thompson is in, he is basically playing against the SGAs. He's playing against the Anthony Edwards. He's playing against arguably much younger 2-3 swingmen, and he has to play those guys on a night in, night out basis. He doesn't rebound like how he used to back in the early days as a splash brother. So if all you're doing is putting him out there for space and reasons, that means that the rest of that roster has to go out there and pick up the slack on certain things. I'm not saying that he is he's a dead leg or anything like that. What I'm saying is that the scheme and the way that the Dallas Mavericks were set up, you knew if they were going to be competitive, that your backcourt combination couldn't be Luka Doncic and Klay Thompson, or just only Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson. Like, there would have to be some defensive elements in there that has to, and it's never lived up to that, man. It's never lived up to that, and they've never addressed it. They rolled the dice on it, but they never properly addressed it. And now it's come back to bite both the Mavericks, and it's also come back to bite Klay Thompson as well, too.
Who knows what the future for Klay holds here? This Mavericks team, as many of the teams that we discussed, is now thinking about what their future is in the short term as well as the long term. Where I've heard everything from AD wants to go home to Chicago to he would entertain a trade and sit down with the management and the ownership group to kind of figure out where they could potentially send him. God knows the apocalypse that would happen if they moved him out, and got back some sort of middling return there. What's Kyrie's future, injured or otherwise? Now, like I think all bets are on the table here, with the exception of them trading Cooper Flagg. I think everything else is like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe we'd look at it and entertain it. But I don't think they need to necessarily, to tease our next week episode. I don't know if they need to abandon ship on this roster completely, but there's going to be some things happening here in Big D, and it could be some big trades happening for the Dallas Mavericks.
Absolutely, man. Listen, all we can hope for, though, is that one, if not all of these teams in some way, shape, or form can rise out of the ashes and get past this part of this phase. But it doesn't look good for the Pelicans. It doesn't look good for the Clippers. It doesn't look good for the Kings. And it definitely does not look good for the Dallas Mavericks. And we can only hope that they come out of the other side of this with some level of prosperity or some type of future to look forward to. Great show altogether, Shaw. Listen, man, we could have basically done a show on each and every single one of these teams individually if we wanted to. Like, there's so much left to unpack in regards to what we've seen and what we know and what we don't know with regards to those teams. But I'm glad that we actually established a forum to be able to talk to obviously 4 teams that are going through it right now.
They really are. The season is still young. Part of Borrego's press conference too is like, hey, there's still 70 games left, right? So there's a lot of season. There's more runway than there is, in front of them than there is behind them, for the season. So everybody has an opportunity to do something different, and doing something different doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to become championship level teams, but finding out who they ultimately are, picking a direction, and establishing culture. If you're, in the words of Borrego and company, all those things can still be established here here in the next, 68 to 70 games, depending on, which team we're talking about. So Sacramento, Clippers, the Pels, and the Mavs, like we're rooting for y'all. We want to talk good basketball, but we had to kind of get into the nitty gritty of what was happening, with your respective organizations to date. And we'll see what the future holds for you the rest of this NBA season.
It's just ironic that 3 of the teams that we're talking about have issues that are not necessarily court related as much as it's surrounding the court in and of itself. And one team, it really is a talent issue. So it'll be interesting to see who addresses what first and how quickly things can be turned around for them through the course of the regular season. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for jumping on with us. And we definitely want to hear your thoughts and comments. Like, let us know, if we're off on where our assessments are. And we certainly want to get your perspective of what you think needs to happen for these 4 teams that we're talking about. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.